Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Brent Venables, the Oklahoma Sooners land their second commitment of the day in four-star defensive lineman Trent Wilson from the state of Maryland. One of the more intriguing prospects in this 2025 class, a kid that tore his meniscus going into his junior year, only played half a season, but you go back to the film of his sophomore year, one of the more impressive defensive linemen in this 2025 class. And we talk about this a lot on the recruiting trail. Sometimes the sport of football is not as complicated as we like to make it out to be. You bet on these kind of guys, right? 6'3", 270 pounds, a 6'8" wingspan. And when we turn on the film, you're going to get a feel for how explosive and athletic a guy like Trent Wilson is. He's a guy that checks a lot of the boxes, probably gets up to 300 pounds as he gets to Oklahoma, and is really going to be a game wrecker on the inside of that defensive line for the Oklahoma Sooners, a kid that I cannot wait to see the senior film, because if he can get back to that form as a sophomore, you're looking at just a physically imposing defensive lineman on the inside, and you're seeing Brent Venables put a strong emphasis on recruiting the lines of scrimmage, not only in the transfer portal, but on the high school recruiting trail. You take a look at that 2024 class, David Stone, Nigel Smith, Jaden Jackson. Brent Venables, looking at this Oklahoma team heading into the SEC, wants to make sure they are adequate and kind of being dominant on the line of scrimmage, and you're seeing that play out on the recruiting trail. Before we get into the film of Trent Wilson, just want to say thank you to you guys, a massive shout out to the Oklahoma fans. It has been busy, but it's been a blast talking this program on the recruiting trail. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas truly does mean a lot. Your guys' support allows me to do what I do. I cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with it. And without further ado, let's get into Trent Wilson. And again, I think what you want to talk about first is really just the upside that Trent Wilson has as a defensive line prospect. 6'3", a 6'8" wingspan. You're going to see on the film, he is well put together and plenty of room for him to really add some mass as he goes into his senior year, as he enrolls at Oklahoma, a guy that I would think Oklahoma wants him getting up to 300-plus pounds, playing on the inside. But when you start combining the explosiveness with the size, with the length that Trent Wilson brings to the table for Oklahoma, I mean, he's checking every single box that you want in an elite defensive line prospect, and a guy that I think there's a good chance that we're talking about Trent Wilson becoming a top 100 national prospect as he gets that senior year film out. Again, for a kid to be ranked in the top 150 nationally after missing most of his junior year, that kind of tells you just about the raw traits that Trent Wilson has. And again, when he puts it on the field his senior year, I think you're going to be talking about one of the top defensive linemen in this 2025 class. A really nice pickup by Oklahoma. Want to get into the film, and I'm going to take us back to the sophomore year film of Trent Wilson, where you see a kid that is probably 15 years old at this time just be extremely dominant. The amount of different ways that Trent Wilson can win, that's what stands out to me the most. You fire up the film, he plays a lot of nose, and this is a guy that's probably no more than 270 as a sophomore, and he wins with a variety of different ways, right? The first rep you're going to see really just working just play strength, right? And getting off blocks, really good at using that length to shed blocks. But then you also see not only the power that he plays with as a sophomore, you're going to see the quick twitch. You talk about quick twitch as a 270-pound defensive lineman. I mean, immediately into the backfield, and then athletic enough to make those kind of plays in the backfield as well. I think he offers you a lot of upside as a pass rusher as well. But you look at that first step that Trent Wilson has, you start looking at how that matches up with some of these top kids on the inside of the offensive line. I mean, not a lot of guys can deal with the twitch that someone like Trent Wilson has from the inside. I think that's the most impressive part of his film. Again, moves all around, plays a little three tech, plays a little nose, but either way he's there. He's a guy that just kind of lives in opponents' backfields. You see the kind of closing speed that he has in the pocket. There's not a lot to like about Trent Wilson, but I think what's most exciting is not necessarily the football player that he is right now. And you go back and watch that rep, this is kind of what we're talking about in terms of, all right, you have all this length, you have that 6'8" wingspan. Can you use that length? And you fire it up, and he just sheds blocks so easily, knows how to use his hands. I look at Trent Wilson like a big ball of clay, a guy that is kind of polished, but has a lot more upside to kind of reach into. And I think Oklahoma is going to be able to get that out of him. I think this is a very intriguing prospect. And we talked about this a little bit earlier today. You look at Oklahoma in this 2025 class, I mean, they're cooking. And not a lot of people are talking about Oklahoma on the recruiting trail right now, but you take a look at what they have, a top 6 class in the country. You add a guy like Trent Wilson. Now, what I was thinking is you look at Oklahoma and kind of their recruiting method was, we're going to go really hard on the defensive line in 2024. And I think that's seriously going to pay some dividends, right? You talk about David Stone, Jaden Jackson, Nigel Smith going into the SEC. You feel good about the line of scrimmage play. On the defensive side of the football, a lot of Oklahoma fans have been a little bit frustrated with what it's looked like on the offensive line in the recruiting trail. You have a guy in Ryan Foja who we talked about and broke him down when I don't think he was even ranked in the top 300. Now he's a top 100 national prospect. It seems like Oklahoma last year spent a lot of their resources, time, and energy recruiting that defensive line. I think the offensive line is really that target, that position that they're really going after. You take a look at some of their top targets in this class. You start with Ty Haywood, 5-star offensive tackle from Denton, Texas. You talk about a tackle that you wanted to build in a laboratory, and that's probably Ty Haywood. Extremely smooth mover, a ton of length, 6'5", 285, very good mover. And then you talk about a guy in Andrew Babaloa who probably needs a little bit more grooming, probably not going to be a guy that comes in immediately and starts for Oklahoma, but a guy that has a basketball background, has every single physical trait that you want in an offensive tackle. We just need him to play a little bit more football. Andrew Babaloa, Ty Haywood as top prospects. You have Ryan Foja already committed. Oklahoma putting a lot of emphasis on the offensive line in this 2025 class. We'll see how it plays out. Wanted to hop on, talk a little Trent Wilson. Again, another very intriguing prospect for the Oklahoma Sooners. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.